A boy and a girl, twins. They were born to my husband and my absolute best friend. I signed the divorce papers in absolute silence. When he took her home to his family's historic estate to break the news to his mother, she reportedly froze the moment she laid eyes on the two infants. "She never told you, did she?" Just as I capped my pen after signing the final page of the divorce settlement, my iPhone lit up. It was a text message from Julian. A single photo. In it, he and Chloe were leaning against each other, beaming with joy as they swaddled two newborns, one in baby blue, the other in blush pink. The background was the expansive sun-drenched window of a VIP maternity suite at Mount Sinai Hospital. Beneath the photo was a short caption, "Healthy boy and girl twins. Chloe and I have started our new chapter together. I hope you can move on with your life too." I placed the phone face down on my desk. Spread out before me was a complete liquidation inventory of every asset registered in my name: stocks, mutual funds, real estate holdings, private equity stakes. Every single item was meticulously cataloged. I had pulled all-nighters for a week straight to organize it. This wasn't for property division. This was to permanently and completely sever all financial ties with Julian Montgomery. He probably assumed that once I signed the agreement his attorney drafted, I would simply fade away. A pathetic woman quietly discarded for his true love. Chloe. He genuinely believed this was his orchestrated victory, the fitting end for a cold, work-obsessed career woman who didn't understand emotional intimacy and couldn't even give him a child. He was dead wrong. I picked up the spreadsheet and walked over to the massive glass whiteboard dominating my home office wall. This glass wall once held the product development pipelines and Series A funding roadmaps I had drawn up to save his failing startup years ago. Today, it was densely covered in neon yellow and pink sticky notes. Intersecting arrows and alphanumeric codes spread across the glass like a complex financial mosaic, mapping out the multi-million-dollar fund flows of dozens of offshore shell companies and holding groups. This was my new battlefield, the ultimate liquidation tool I had prepared just for myself. My phone buzzed again. An incoming call. The names Julian Times flashed on the screen. I stared at the screen for 3 seconds, before sliding my ink-stained finger across the glass, just before it went to voicemail. I didn't say a word. From the other end of the line came Julian's deliberately subdued yet unmistakably smug voice, bubbling up like the fizz of a freshly popped bottle of champagne. "Did you see the picture?" He paused, clearly waiting for me to break down or react. When I maintained my silence, he continued in a boastful tone that felt like it was trying to punch straight through the cellular towers and slap me across the face. Chloe and I had twins, a boy and a girl. The little guy is 6lb3 Oz, and his sister is 5lb12 Oz. Super healthy. It was a rough delivery for Chloe, but it was all worth it. You really should be happy for us. Holding a bright red dry erase marker in my left hand, I traced the end of a dotted line representing a fund transfer to a Delaware LLC on the bottom right corner of the whiteboard and drew a massive, forceful question mark. The tip of the marker squeaked sharply against the glass. "Oh," I replied to the empty room in a completely flat voice. Then I asked, "Should I send a gift?" "By your family's Southern hospitality standards, I suppose I owe 2 gifts now." The other end of the line went dead silent for a moment. I could vividly picture Julian's expression right then. His triumphant smirk froze stiff on his face. He had placed this call specifically to hear me devastated, to hear me scream, cry, and hysterically interrogate him. My suffering was the necessary spice he needed to justify his betrayal and infidelity, elevating his and Chloe's illicit affair into a grand, tragic, and victorious romance. Instead, he got nothing. Nothing but my tasteless acknowledgement and a mundane question about baby registry etiquette. After roughly 30 seconds, he finally spoke again. The artificial tenderness had vanished from his voice, replaced by the hypocritical, patronizing pity I had grown all too familiar with over 5 years of marriage. "Elena, please don't be like this," he sighed, sounding as if he genuinely cared about my emotional well-being. "I know it hurts. There's no point in acting tough. We were married for 5 years. What happened between us isn't entirely my fault. You were just too strong, You tried to execute everything like a corporate project, trying to control every variable. Our apartment felt like an icebox. In 5 years, I never felt a shred of warmth. But Chloe is different. She gives me a real home. A truly warm, loving home. A home. I repeated the word silently in my head. I shifted my gaze from the cold numbers and arrows on the glass wall and looked out the window. Outside, the gray skyline of downtown Chicago stretched out to the horizon. The glass facades of the surrounding skyscrapers, reflecting a dull, leaden light. We had lived in this ultra-luxury high-rise for 5 years of our marriage. Yet I had rarely ever taken the time to simply stand here and appreciate the view. I had poured the best 5 years of my life into Julian and his bankrupt tech startup NextGen Solutions. I held a master's degree in financial risk management and went straight into a Big Four accounting firm right out of grad school, working myself to the bone to become a senior manager. I met Julian when he was drowning in debt with his new venture. I used my specialized background to completely rebuild his financial models, untangle his chaotic accounting ledgers, and pull all-nighters writing his business plans. I sat by his side through endless venture capital pitch meetings, drinking myself sick with potential corporate partners just to secure his first decent round of angel investment. Later, when the company teetered on the brink of insolvency multiple times, I leveraged my professional network and my personal savings, even going so far as to quietly take out a home equity line of credit on the small suburban house my late parents left me to plug his fatal cash flow deficits. I thought we were comrades in arms, equal partners who guarded each other's backs in the corporate trenches. I never imagined that in his eyes I was merely an icebox that refused to warm up. Julian's voice dragged me back to reality. A home with children laughing, warm home-cooked meals waiting on the table, and a light left on for me when I get back. Not a house where I come home at midnight only to watch you stare at risk spreadsheets and audit data. Elena, I had my lawyer draft the property settlement agreement. I'll have it couriered to your office tomorrow. Don't worry, I'm not ungrateful. You stood by me through the lean years and suffered a lot. I'll make sure you get what you're owed. That won't be necessary, I interrupted him, my voice entirely devoid of inflection. The settlement papers are already prepared. They're inside the antique steel safe in your home office. The combination is your birthday. I've already signed every page. Julian fell silent again. The silence lasted much longer. I could even hear his ragged, slightly accelerated breathing over the receiver. He was frantically trying to process this information, his brain working overtime to figure out when I had prepared the documents and how I had discovered the combination to his private safe. By now, his face was surely a mix of shock, humiliation, and the sudden infuriating realization that his prey had willingly slipped the snare. "Since when have you been planning this?" he finally demanded, his voice suddenly dry and growly. "Since the first time you claimed you were pulling an all-nighter with the engineering team for a product launch, and Chloe posted a picture of the city skyline from a suite at the Ritz-Carlton on her Instagram." I answered cleanly and without hesitation. "Don't forget what I do for a living, Jules. I eat, sleep, and breathe risk assessment. My job is to analyze minute, anomalous data points to predict and mitigate catastrophic financial defaults. Marriage in a corporate sense is simply a cooperative partnership requiring active risk management. When the risk index exceeds my maximum allowable tolerance, executing an immediate stop-loss is the only logical move." With that, I didn't wait for his rebuttal. I ended the call, switched my phone to silent, and tossed it face down onto the leather sofa. The intricate web of financial transfers on my whiteboard seemed to shimmer before my eyes, overlapping bizarrely with the last 5 years of my domestic life. That marketing expansion budget he clumsily misappropriated corresponded precisely to the first Hermes Birkin bag he gifted Chloe. The repeatedly inflated R&D payroll expenses covered the flights, and overwater bungalow bills for their secret getaway to Maui, and those recurring consulting fees wired monthly from several anonymous shell companies were undoubtedly paying the mortgage on the luxury midtown condo registered under Chloe's name. Chloe, my former college roommate, my supposed best friend who shared a cramped dorm room with me for 4 years like a sister. We rode the crowded subways together, shared a dingy, roach-infested apartment in Queens after graduation, and spent countless late nights drinking cheap wine on the fire escape, complaining about unreasonable bosses and toxic ex-boyfriends. Even after I landed a high-paying corporate job, I never forgot her. I leveraged my internal contacts to get her a respectable administrative position at a decent firm. She and Julian met at a weekend dinner party I hosted to celebrate a promotion. I remember laughing that night, slapping Julian lightly on the shoulder and saying, "Chloe is my absolute best friend in the world, so you'd better treat her like royalty." What a sickening irony. I used to think that when the scalpel of truth finally sliced through the glamorous veneer of my life to reveal the rotting, infected reality beneath, I would be paralyzed by agonizing pain, feeling my entire universe collapse around me. But it didn't happen that way. As the pieces of evidence lined up before me one after another, the very first emotion that surfaced was a cold, almost surgical professional composure. My brain kicked into gear like a high-speed quantitative algorithm, automatically calculating total losses, assessing current liabilities, and drafting optimal mitigation strategies. The grief and rage were compressed into a tiny sealed compartment at the very bottom of my rational mind. Divorce was a swift stop-loss. Liquidating my assets was simply reclaiming my initial capital contribution. As for Julian and Chloe, I stared at the bold red question mark on my whiteboard and allowed a cold, ironic smirk to touch the corners of my mouth. Sometimes retribution doesn't require getting your own hands dirty. Because exactly 1 week ago, my nominal mother-in-law, Beatrice Montgomery, had placed a highly unusual rambling telephone call to me that lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Throughout that exhausting call, the aristocratic Southern matriarch sighed repeatedly, using the roundabout passive-aggressive phrasing typical of old-money socialites to hint at a deep, suffocating anxiety keeping her awake at night. She wasn't worried about her successful CEO son, nor was she lamenting the loss of her useless daughter-in-law. Her anxiety revolved entirely around Chloe, the sweet, traditional, domestically inclined woman Julian constantly bragged about, who was supposedly carrying the next generation of Montgomery heirs. The next afternoon, right on schedule, Julian arrived at my penthouse, accompanied by his corporate counsel, Brad Harrison. Julian was wearing a brand-new tailored Armani suit. Every hair gelled perfectly into place, his face exuding confidence mixed with a trace of underlying defensive caution. Chloe wasn't with him. It made sense. Having just given birth, she was likely lounging in a high-end postpartum recovery retreat, eagerly savoring the fruits of her victory. Inside my penthouse, every single item belonging to Julian, from his custom golf clubs and high-fidelity audio system to his extensive collection of imported anime figurines and discarded silk pajamas, had been categorized, securely packed and neatly stacked by the front entrance. The towering stack of heavy cardboard boxes looked like a miniature graveyard of our marriage. When Julian pushed the door open and took in the scene, his brow furrowed deeply. The calm, superior demeanor he was trying so hard to project cracked instantly. "Elena, what is the meaning of this?" His tone was sharp, his eyes bypassing the boxes to glare at me with suspicious scrutiny. "There's no need to kick me out like a stray dog." "Why make this so ugly and dramatic?" I sat calmly on the living room sofa. A thin stack of legal documents spread across the coffee table in front of me. I ignored his complaint entirely and simply raised my chin toward the empty armchairs opposite me. Julian and Attorney Harrison exchanged a brief look. Harrison pushed his gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose and sat down first, adopting a strictly professional, detached posture. I slid the top document across the glass table toward Julian. "This is the property division agreement. All premarital assets remain the sole property of their respective owners. I assume there are no objections to that clause. Our marital assets consist primarily of your 35% equity stake in NextGen Solutions, 3 jointly owned real estate properties, 2 vehicles, and several diversified investment portfolios. My proposed allocation is laid out clearly on page 2. Take a look." Julian didn't reach for it. Attorney Harrison picked up the packet and began scanning the pages with rapid precision. After reading just 3 pages, the lawyer's expression shifted dramatically. He adjusted his glasses twice in quick succession, looking up at me with a gaze filled with a mixture of professional shock and sharp reassessment. "Mrs. Montgomery," Harrison began, his voice intentionally level, though he couldn't completely mask his incredulity. "It appears there are several critical discrepancies in this proposal. Mr. Montgomery's equity in NextGen Solutions is an operational business asset under state statutory guidelines regarding marital asset appreciation, as well as the explicit terms outlined in your prenuptial agreement's addendum." Counselor Harrison, I cut him off smoothly, pulling a much thicker, professionally bound legal binder from beside my laptop and placing it directly in front of him. This contains certified copies of all core financial ledgers for NextGen Solutions from its incorporation to the present fiscal quarter, complete bank wire transaction histories, and the formal investment subscription agreements for all 5 major funding rounds. Specifically, rounds 2 and 3 occurred when the firm's operational cash flow was completely exhausted and bankruptcy was imminent. The capital injected during those crises came entirely from my personal funds, channeled through my late mother's family trust. I paused for a breath, watching Attorney Harrison's eyes widen in genuine shock as Julian's face darkened with sudden apprehension. I continued in a calm, measured tone. "According to Section 4, Paragraph B of our prenuptial addendum, all equity acquired via independent personal capital injection during marriage, along with 100% of its subsequent market appreciation, remains my exclusive, non-divisible personal property. Furthermore, regarding the 15% equity stake in NextGen purchased using our joint marital funds, I am willing to assign my half to Julian at a 50% valuation discount based on current market metrics. After all, with 2 new infants in the picture, his household expenditures are about to increase exponentially." Attorney Harrison's hands were trembling slightly now. He flipped through the thick binder with desperate speed, his face growing paler with every page he turned. He likely never imagined in his wildest dreams that this quiet ex-wife, who had spent the last 5 years staying out of the corporate spotlight and playing the supportive partner, was sitting on such a comprehensive, lethal cache of evidentiary documentation. These documents didn't just clarify equity ownership. They acted as a legal scalpel, peeling back the layers to expose his client's continuous, highly questionable financial manipulations. Julian's face went from angry red to a sickly ash gray. He snatched the property division agreement right out of Harrison's hands and glared at me, looking as though he were truly seeing who I was for the very first time. "You set me up," he hissed through clenched teeth, his voice vibrating with suppressed rage and a dawning icy terror. "You've been plotting against me this whole time, haven't you? I am simply stating verifiable financial facts and dividing our legal assets," I replied, taking a slow sip of the cold tea sitting beside me. The chilled liquid slid down my throat, sharpening my focus even further. "Have you forgotten, Jules? That proprietary financial forecasting model that blew away NextGen's very first venture capital investors. I pulled 3 consecutive all-nighters surviving on espresso to build that from scratch for you. When you secured that first $5 million seed round, the institutional investors couldn't find a single flaw in the financial architecture." I leaned forward slightly, and that rigorous due diligence report, I cashed in major favors with my former senior partners at the accounting firm to get that generated. That report saved your company from stepping into at least 7 lethal contractual landmines. Did you forget that too? "Enough!" Julian roared, slamming his fist onto the glass coffee table so hard my teacup rattled against its saucer. The veins in his temples bulged as he pointed a trembling finger right at my face, barking in a low, furious voice. "What is the point of bringing up ancient history? You helped me with the business. Fine, that is a fact. But what did you ever do for this family? Spreadsheets, audit reports, data analytics? What else are you actually capable of? Do you have any idea how desperately my mother wanted grandchildren these past 5 years? You were always busy, always working, always on a flight. What I needed was a wife, a mother who could bear my children, not a cold-blooded corporate partner." This was undoubtedly the rehearsed narrative he and Chloe had perfected together. The shared justification they used to comfort and validate each other during their countless stolen nights in hotel rooms. convincing themselves their betrayal was morally righteous. By saying it out loud now, he clearly believed he could claim the moral high ground and righteously condemn my failures as a traditional wife. Watching his flushed face and listening to his Swiss cheese arguments, I actually felt the urge to laugh. In fact, I did let out a short, soft laugh, but the humor didn't reach my eyes. "Children," I set my teacup down, tilting my head to meet his furious, insecure glare without flinching. "Jules, we actively tried to conceive for 2 solid years. We consulted 3 top fertility specialists in the country and underwent every invasive medical test available. And what was the unanimous conclusion from every single chief physician? Both of our physiological panels were entirely normal. There was 0 medical impediment to conception. So tell me, why didn't I ever get pregnant?" Julian's gaze flickered sharply. He looked away, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. That was because your psychological stress levels were way too high. You spend 24 hours a day obsessing over corporate risk and financial defaults. Of course, your hormone balance was entirely wrecked. That was your own personal failure. He tried force-feeding me the blame, but the aggressive conviction had drained out of his voice. "Right." My smirk deepened, though my voice dropped to a glacial chill. "Then explain to me how Chloe magically managed to get pregnant by accident on her very first try with you, and hit the biological jackpot with boy-girl twins, no less. Her corporate administrative job isn't exactly low-stress, Jules. From what I recall, she's constantly on extreme crash diets to maintain her figure, and her lifestyle habits are far more chaotic and irregular than mine ever were. Why is it that when it comes to her, every basic law of reproductive medicine simply ceases to apply?" Those words struck like poison needles, piercing straight through his fragile, arrogant facade. His breath caught in his throat, the color draining completely from his cheeks. A flash of intense panic crossed his eyes before he desperately tried to mask it with feigned indignation. "Don't be so sarcastic and bitter," he countered, his neck stiffening as he tried to defend her. "Clueless. Chloe just has a naturally healthy constitution. She isn't a stressed-out corporate machine who pulls all-nighters every week like you." His rebuttal was so flimsy and pathetic it barely convinced the air in the room, let alone me. "I see, that explains it." I nodded slowly, acting as if I accepted his ridiculous medical theory, and dropped the subject entirely. I stood up, walked over to the entryway, and grabbed the handle of a sleek silver-rimmed suitcase leaning against the wall. "If there are no legal objections to the settlement terms, sign the document. Once you sign, you can take every single one of these boxes out of my penthouse." I paused, my hand resting on the silver handle. "Oh, by the way, inside the bottom compartment of the antique safe in your home office is that PC Philippe Celestial complication watch you spent 2 years pulling strings to acquire. And tucked behind your cedar cigar humidor is $50,000 in crisp bundles of cash. I didn't touch either of them. Raising 2 infants simultaneously is going to be exceptionally expensive. Consider those my modest parting gifts to your children." Julian's face shifted rapidly from crimson to chalk white, his chest heaving as he struggled for air. He glared at me with eyes that looked ready to spit fire. Yet burning beneath the rage was the helpless terror of a man who knew he had been thoroughly outmaneuvered. Beside him, Attorney Harrison leaned in and whispered something urgently into his ear, likely advising him that further stubborn resistance was legally futile, and his smartest tactical move was to sign immediately and salvage whatever equity he could, before I unleashed worse. Julian ground his murs together, practically ripping the Mont Blanc pen out of Harrison's hand, and violently slashed his signature across the bottom of the property division agreement. The heavy tip of the pen actually tore through the thick parchment paper with a sharp, aggressive scratch. With the document signed, Julian looked like a rooster that had just lost a brutal cockfight. The arrogant swagger he had marched in with was completely eradicated, leaving behind only a brittle, hollow shell of bravado. He glared at me with pure, unadulterated malice. "Don't get too smug, Elena," he hissed, every word scraped out from between his teeth. "You're going to regret this. You're going to spend the rest of your sad life clutching your bank accounts and your audit reports. And you are going to die completely alone. But me? I have Chloe. I have a son and a daughter. I am the actual winner in this life. Just watch me. I ignored his pathetic loser sermon entirely. I simply stood by and watched in silence as he, Attorney Harrison, and 2 assistants they called up from the lobby frantically carted the towering stacks of cardboard boxes out of my apartment. Within 10 minutes, the entryway was completely empty with a heavy solid Times thud. The custom oak front door swung shut, locking out the noise, the drama, and the suffocatingly toxic atmosphere. The penthouse fell completely silent. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the city grid below. The evening rush hour traffic flowed like rivers of white and red light along the downtown expressways. In the distance, the corporate neon signs were just beginning to flicker on, illuminating the cold, magnificent skyline of Chicago. The actual winner in this life. Jules, your definition of winning is so superficial and pathetic it's almost funny. You have absolutely no concept of the Category 5 hurricane that is currently heading straight for your life. I walked back to the sofa and picked up my iPhone. The screen was still displaying the hospital photo Julian had texted me, the happy little family of 3. I swiped out of the message thread, opened my contacts, and scrolled down until I found a number saved under the name Times Betrayal Montgomery, mother-in-law. I had barely used this number since my relationship with Julian began to deteriorate over his demands for a traditional housewife. Our last substantive contact had been that strange 2-hour and 17-minute marathon call 7 days ago. I opened a blank message template and typed out a single, precise sentence. Julian and Chloe recently welcomed boy and girl twins. He is overjoyed and mentioned he plans to bring the babies back to Savannah next weekend to host a grand celebration at the family estate. Just wanted to share the happy news with you, Beatrice. My thumb hovered over the send icon for a fraction of a second before I pressed down firmly. A soft chime confirmed the message had been delivered. Without a shred of hesitation, I immediately tapped Julian and Chloe's contact profiles and permanently blocked them across every cellular and social media platform. I purged their records from my phone entirely. When the digital house cleaning was done, I tossed the phone onto the sofa and walked back over to my glass whiteboard. Among the dense network of financial flows and red question marks, one specific node stood out. I picked up a blue dry erase marker and uncapped it. Right next to the massive red question mark, I slowly printed 2 words. Game on. This was merely the overture. The real show was just about to start. Julian moved even faster than I anticipated. Just 3 days after our divorce decree was formally finalized by the judge, I spotted his latest public post while browsing Instagram from a burner account. It was a carousel of 9 professional photographs accompanied by a nauseatingly sentimental caption. From now on, 1 + 1 = 4. Grateful for everything in my life. Excited for our bright future together. In the photos, Chloe was dressed in plush designer loungewear, her hair tied back in a loose, casual bun, her face artfully free of heavy makeup as she cradled the 2 infants in her arms. She looked at the cameras with a gaze so dripping with maternal sweetness it looked staged for a parenting magazine. Julian stood behind her, his arms wrapped securely around her shoulders, his chin resting gently on the top of her head. His face radiated an unmistakable glow of arrogant pride and patriarchal accomplishment. The setting was the living room of their new luxury home, decorated in soft, warm earth tones I had never seen before, overflowing with high-end baby swings, organic plush toys, and golden sunlight streaming across the hardwood floors. It looked like the ultimate picture of domestic bliss. The comment section beneath the post had erupted into a massive virtual celebration among our professional and social circles. Mr. Montgomery, you are crushing it. Thriving business and a gorgeous family. The true definition of a winner. Your wife is stunning and the babies are little angels. Congratulations, boy-girl twins. That is the ultimate biological jackpot, Jules. Your family is truly blessed. 2 at once, 1 of each. You must have done something right in a past life, man. Cheers. Several of our mutual corporate acquaintances and university friends had left flattering celebratory remarks as well. Reading between the lines, I could easily detect their underlying awkwardness and cautious diplomacy. Everyone knew I had just been divorced. Yet, they were rushing to bow to the new queen. Julian was replying to almost every single comment with energetic enthusiasm. His tone was a sickening cocktail of false modesty and sheer vanity. Acting like a conquering king who had just established a new dynasty and couldn't wait to display the crown jewels to the entire world. He felt justified in his arrogance. During our 5 years together, he hadn't managed to produce a single heir. Yet, within a year of carrying on with Chloe, he not only got a child, but hit the traditional family jackpot, a healthy son and daughter. For a man steeped to his bone marrow in old-fashioned Southern patriarchal values, a man who valued family lineage, legacy, and social standing above life itself, and for his aristocratic family who shared those exact same obsessions, this was the ultimate badge of honor. It was a glorious accomplishment that instantly washed away the moral sin of his infidelity and divorce. I scrolled calmly through the photos and the endless stream of congratulations, closed the app, and booted up my encrypted laptop. I logged into a secure 2-factor authenticated email server. A new message was waiting in my inbox. The sender's address was a randomized string of alphanumeric characters, but I knew exactly who was on the other end. I clicked open the message. The body of the email was completely empty. Attached was a single encrypted zip file and a separate plain text document. The plain text file contained only a street address. I downloaded the zip file, entered the complex 16-character decryption key, and extracted the contents. Inside were 14 high-resolution digital photographs. The images showed a young man dressed in a dark gray hoodie, his face partially obscured by a black baseball cap and a surgical mask, hurriedly entering the front sliding doors of a private fertility clinic on several different dates and times. Despite his aggressive attempts at concealment, I recognized him instantly from his distinct slouched gait and the tiny discolored birthmark just below his left earlobe. It was Travis Montgomery, Julian's first cousin, 2 years younger than him. Travis held a phantom executive title at Next Gen Solutions, drawing a fat 6-figure salary while spending his days slacking off, playing online poker, and partying in VIP nightclub booths. His primary life skills consisted of racking up gambling debts and crashing expensive sports cars. And the clinic in the photographs bore an impressive, highly clinical name on its brass plaque, Prime Life Reproductive Institute. This was the exact same boutique medical facility that Beatrice Montgomery had mentioned during our marathon phone call. The place where she had anxiously accompanied Chloe for a routine prenatal checkup, because Chloe claimed she was feeling under the weather. I opened the plain text document and plugged the street address into my mapping software. The location pinned onto a rundown decade-old apartment complex located on the industrial outskirts of Chicago, right near a major freight distribution hub. The neighborhood was sketchy, the rent was dirt cheap, and it was roughly a 40-minute drive from Prime Life Reproductive Institute. I knew from family gossip that Travis leased a cheap studio apartment out there as a private crash pad whenever he wanted to lie low or entertain questionable company away from his family's prying eyes. I downloaded every piece of documentation, saved them onto a secure hardware-encrypted external flash drive, and typed a 2-word reply to the anonymous sender. Payment wired. With the transaction finalized, I walked into my kitchen and brewed a cup of loose-leaf green tea. The crisp, slightly earthy aroma filled the quiet penthouse. Holding the warm ceramic mug, I stepped out onto the private terrace. The night air was cool against my skin, and the Chicago city lights glittered below like a vast ocean of diamonds. Every variable was tracking precisely according to my projections. With that digital errand completed, I turned my full attention to finalizing the corporate liquidation of the 15% Next Gen Solutions equity stake I had stripped from Julian in the settlement. Julian's attorney, Brad Harrison, proved exceptionally efficient when handling straight corporate finance. By the following afternoon, a massive 7-figure wire transfer had successfully cleared and settled into my designated private banking account. Staring at the notification banner on my mobile banking app, my heart rate didn't elevate by a single beat. This capital was originally mine to begin with. It was the hard-earned return on 5 years of my professional youth, countless sleepless nights of labor, and the liquidated equity of my late parents' estate. It had simply returned to its rightful owner, and very soon it would be deployed for a much larger, far more definitive purpose. Over the next several days, my life operated with the disciplined precision of a Swiss chronometer. I woke up at 7:00 a.m. sharp, completed a rigorous 1-hour workout, and was at my desk by 9:00 a.m. to execute risk consulting contracts for several independent corporate clients. My afternoons were spent in high meetings with my personal legal team and private wealth managers, systematically restructuring my total liquid assets and moving the entire portfolio into an offshore family trust structure. It was imperative that my capital and my future be entirely ring-fenced from my marital past. During this week, several former friends and corporate colleagues called my personal line. Their tones were universally cautious, fishing for details about the sudden divorce. I gave every single one of them the exact same standardized corporate response. We parted amicably due to irreconcilable differences in long-term life goals. Only one caller, a female executive who had attended college with both Chloe and me, finally lost her composure after several minutes of polite hesitation. She lowered her voice to an angry whisper over the line. "Elena, are you really just going to let them walk over you like this? What Chloe did is absolutely unforgivable. She's been like this since our dorm days, acting all sweet and innocent on the outside. But underneath, she's a calculating viper who will do whatever it takes to snatch anything she covets, especially if it belongs to someone else. I never dreamed she would actually stoop to stealing her best friend's husband." I cut her off smoothly, my voice entirely devoid of emotional resonance. Julian and I separated because our marriage failed. Whatever choices he made after that are his own business. My friend let out a frustrated sigh. "You don't get it, Elena. Jules is spinning a completely different story to everyone in our network. He's claiming you were an absolute nightmare to live with. Cold, controlling, and emotionally barren, and that he had no choice but to leave for his own mental health. And Chloe, she's even worse. She's playing the ultimate martyr in her little mommy circles, crying crocodile tears and claiming times you times voluntarily stepped aside because you felt guilty about not giving him children, allowing their true love to flourish. She tells everyone how sorry she feels for you. It makes me want to vomit. Those two shameless sociopaths deserve each other." "Oh, really?" I arched an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of my tea. "Is that the official narrative they're running with?" "Yes. They've painted themselves as tragic romantic heroes who overcame massive obstacles to build a family. And get this, I heard from a mutual friend in Savannah that Jules is hosting a massive, lavish baby debut and naming reception at the Montgomery family estate next weekend. He's inviting every major socialite, politician, and business elite in the county to formally present Chloe and the twins. He wants to solidify his public image as the ultimate business and family patriarch." "I see." I set my teacup down on the table, a cold, humorless smile forming on my lips. "I'm sure it will be a truly magnificent celebration." After disconnecting the call, I walked over to my desk and flipped open my leather-bound calendar. Next weekend's date had already been circled twice in bright red ink. Julian's hometown was an historic old money Southern community nestled among the marshlands and weeping oaks of South Carolina, a place where traditional etiquette, family lineage, and public reputation were valued above the law. In a town like that, social gossip traveled faster than fiber-optic broadband, and a public scandal could permanently destroy a family standing for generations. If a prominent family suffered even a minor embarrassment, the entire county knew about it before noon, and it remained prime country club chatter for the next 30 years. Jules, the grander you build your stage and the more high society spectators you invite to the theater, the more catastrophic the bodily trauma when you get shoved off the platform. I picked up my phone and dialed a specialized number. The line rang 6 times before it clicked open. From the receiver came a warm, distinctly Southern female voice, carrying a trace of exhaustion, but undeniable genuine affection. "Hello, who's calling?" "Aunt Martha, it's me." "Elena," I said softly, allowing my tone to relax into familiar warmth. "Elena, sweetheart, my goodness." Aunt Martha's voice jumped 3 octaves, instantly flooded with pleasant surprise. "What a wonderful treat. Why are you calling your old auntie? How have you been?" Are you working yourself to death up in that windy city? Have you been eating properly? I'm doing wonderful, Aunt Martha. How are you and Uncle Robert doing? Oh, we're just fine, darling. Just fine, though. Your uncle's gout is acting up again with all this humid weather we've been having. After a few minutes of pleasant family catch-up, I shifted the conversation to my primary objective. Aunt Martha, will you be around next weekend? I have some personal business to attend to down in Savannah, and I was planning to fly in for a couple of days. Next weekend? Why, of course, honey. If my little Elena is coming home, I will clear my social calendar completely. Martha answered instantly, though her tone quickly shifted into maternal concern. Is everything all right, sweetheart? Did you and Julian have a falling out? Just the other day at the country club, I bumped into Mrs. Henderson, and she said she saw Julian's mother, Beatrice, looking like she'd seen a ghost, sighing and wringing her hands like the world was ending. But when folks asked her what was wrong, she clammed up tight. Aunt Martha worked as a senior administrative director at the county courthouse. While it wasn't a corporate suite role, her position placed her at the absolute epicenter of local municipal gossip. She knew everyone, heard everything, possessed an unshakable moral compass, and absolutely despised high society hypocrisy. There are just a few legal and financial matters I need to tie up in person. I'll explain everything over dinner when I get there, I said smoothly. Oh, and Aunt Martha, please keep my trip entirely confidential for now. Don't mention it to anyone at the club, especially not anyone connected to the Montgomery family. The line went silent for 2 beats. With her decades of navigating small-town politics, Aunt Martha immediately sensed the underlying gravity of my request. Her tone hardened into serious reliability. Understood. Honey, you don't worry about a thing. Just send me your flight details and I'll pick you up at the airport myself. No need to drive out to the airport, Aunt Martha. I'll rent a car and drive into town. I'll call you the second I check into my hotel. All right, darling. You travel safe, you hear? Ending the call with Aunt Martha felt like locking the final deadbolt on a vault. The afternoon before the grand Montgomery family baby debut, I drove a sleek, inconspicuous rental car into the picturesque, moss-draped southern town where Julian had been raised. The town was framed by slow-moving tidal rivers, its historic cobblestone streets polished smooth by centuries of carriage wheels and luxury sedans. Antebellum mansions with sprawling wraparound porches and pristine white columns lined the avenues. The humid air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and salt water. Time seemed to move at a deliberate aristocratic crawl here. Without alerting a soul, I checked into a newly constructed boutique hotel situated on the eastern edge of the historic district. Securing a top-floor corner suite using my corporate ID, my suite was on the 8th floor. Drawing back the sheer curtains, I had an unobstructed bird's-eye view of the sprawling Montgomery family estate just 3 blocks away. The manicured front lawn of the estate had already been transformed into an extravagant event venue. A massive cream-colored reception tent was erected across the grass, decorated with elaborate floral archways, golden chandeliers, and hundreds of pastel blue and pink balloons. A massive silk banner stretched across the second-story balcony of the main house, embossed with shimmering gold calligraphy, celebrating the baptism and debut of heirs, Montgomery boy and girl twins. The Montgomerys were old Southern aristocracy. Julian's father was a retired federal district judge who commanded immense local respect. And Julian was widely viewed as the most successful crown jewel of his generation. The brilliant big-city corporate CEO whom local high society matrons constantly held up as the gold standard to their own underperforming sons. This baby debut wasn't merely a party to celebrate 2 infants. It was a loud, triumphant declaration to the entire state that the Montgomery dynasty had secured its lineage, its wealth, and its future. I pulled the heavy blackout curtain shut, opened my laptop, and connected to my encrypted mobile hotspot. I initiated a comprehensive final review of the digital payload I had prepared for tomorrow's festivities. It was a standard high-speed black USB flash drive containing a meticulously compiled forensic-level investigation report executed by a top-tier private intelligence firm over the past 3 weeks. First, high-resolution surveillance timestamps confirming Travis Montgomery had entered Prime Life Reproductive Institute on 7 distinct occasions over the past year, complete with vehicular registration tracking and time-stamped entry logs. Second, a comprehensive telecom metadata summary detailing extensive late-night cellular communications between Chloe and Travis over the 12 months preceding the pregnancy. While the audio wasn't recorded, the frequency and timing of the calls correlated precisely with Chloe's initial fertility clinic consultations and subsequent ovulation cycles. Third, a detailed background investigation into Prime Life Reproductive Institute itself. While operating as a fully licensed medical facility on paper, the institute quietly catered to ultra-wealthy clients seeking specialized off-the-books reproductive services. The report documented their private donor concierge program, which allowed clients to secretly select specific biological specimens from family, members, or associates to circumvent genetic screening red flags. Travis Montgomery was formally cataloged in their database as an active verified donor under the clinical profile identifier donor K7. Finally, an authoritative medical analytics evaluation drafted by a board-certified reproductive endocrinologist, utilizing the few candid lifestyle photographs and fitness tracker data Julian had proudly posted of Chloe online over the years. Combined with her documented clinical history, the report calculated the statistical probability of Chloe conceiving fraternal boy-girl twins naturally at less than 0.4%. Conversely, the probability of achieving this precise biological outcome via targeted in vitro fertilization utilizing pre-screened embryos was calculated at over 88%. Every disparate data point linked together seamlessly, forming an airtight forensic masterpiece. Chloe had never conceived naturally with Julian. She had utilized Prime Life Reproductive Institute to undergo an IVF cycle using third-party donor sperm and potentially donor eggs as well, given her own dietary restrictions and medical profile. The biological father of those twins was none other than Julian's deadbeat cousin, Travis. She had staged an elaborate melodramatic biological fraud, successfully duping Julian, his aristocratic parents, and the entire high society community. Her rationale for selecting Travis was coldly pragmatic, likely resting on 3 pillars. First, as a weak-willed, financially dependent family member, Travis was easily manipulated and controlled through bribery or blackmail. Second, by utilizing a direct Montgomery blood relative, any future routine genetic tests or physical family resemblances would easily pass casual scrutiny without raising alarm bells. Third, Travis was broke and desperate for cash, making his silence cheap to buy. It was an exceptionally calculating, ruthless scheme. However, Chloe had made 2 fatal miscalculations in her risk assessment model. First, she failed to factor in the terrifying volcanic wrath of an old-money Southern matriarch who valued family honor, genetic lineage, and social prestige above life itself. She never anticipated what Beatrice Montgomery would do when, confronted with the reality that her celebrated grandchildren were the product of a cheap medical deception involving the family's most embarrassing relative. Second, she completely underestimated me. She assumed that because I was a professional woman who valued logic over melodrama, I would simply absorb the emotional trauma of infidelity, sign whatever papers were put in front of me, and quietly vanish into the corporate background like a defeated victim. She forgot or simply lacked the intellectual capacity to comprehend that a senior corporate risk auditor's greatest professional asset is the ability to detect anomalous data patterns beneath a placid surface, systematically assemble the evidence, and execute a lethal precision strike precisely when the target is most vulnerable. I never enter a boardroom or a battlefield without a complete exit strategy. As the evening shadows lengthened across the historic town, I changed into an inconspicuous dark gray athletic tracksuit, pulled a black baseball cap low over my eyes, tucked my long hair securely up inside the brim, and slipped out of the hotel via the side exit. I blended seamlessly into the warm, bustling evening foot traffic along the historic waterfront. I stepped into a classic wood-paneled local tavern popular with the old town crowd, sliding into a dimly lit corner booth and ordering a simple club sandwich and iced tea. The tavern was packed and lively, and nearly every table around me was buzzing with excited chatter about tomorrow's massive Montgomery estate celebration. Can you believe it? Old Judge Montgomery's boy, the big shot CEO up in Chicago, is throwing the biggest baby debut this town has seen since the governor's inauguration. Boy and girl twins. Now, that is what I call carrying on the family legacy. You said it. Jules was always the smartest kid in our graduating class, and now he's running a multi-million-dollar tech firm. And his new wife, beautiful Southern girl, super sweet, and blessed them with an heir and a spare on her first try. That family lives a charmed life, I swear. Hey, whatever happened to his first wife? Didn't he marry some corporate financial executive up north a few years back? Oh, her. I heard from Beatrix Bridge Club that the first wife was an absolute nightmare. A cold-blooded workaholic who cared more about her laptop than making a home. They were married for 5 solid years, and she couldn't even give him a child. You really think an old family like the Montgomery would put up with a barren corporate iceberg forever? Jules divested and upgraded just in time. This new girl actually knows how to take care of a man and build a real family. I kept my head down, methodically, eating my sandwich in silence. Envy, disdain, ignorant small-town speculation. Every toxic syllable drifted clearly into my booth. It was obvious that Julian and Chloe had successfully weaponized his parents' social standing to completely dominate the local narrative. The entire county was currently convinced I was a cold, infertile failure who had been rightfully discarded by the town's golden boy. While Chloe was being elevated as the fertile, loving savior of the Montgomery family dynasty. Perfect. In financial risk management, the higher a fraudulent asset is artificially pumped, the more catastrophic and absolute the market correction. When the bubble finally pops, public sentiment is a two-edged sword. When it swings back, it cuts deeper than any legal injunction. I paid my tab in cash, pulled the brim of my cap down even lower, and slipped out of the tavern into the humid southern night. Back in my hotel suite. The sender's address was a randomized string of alphanumeric characters, but I knew exactly who was on the other end. I clicked open the message. The body of the email was completely empty. Attached was a single encrypted zip file and a separate plain text document. The plain text file contained only a street address. I downloaded the zip file, entered the complex 16-character decryption key, and extracted the contents. Inside were 14 high-resolution digital photographs. The images showed a young man dressed in a dark gray hoodie, his face partially obscured by a black baseball cap and a surgical mask, hurriedly entering the front sliding doors of a private fertility clinic on several different dates and times. Despite his aggressive attempts at concealment, I recognized him instantly from his distinct slouched gait and the tiny discolored birthmark just below his left earlobe. It was Travis Montgomery, Julian's first cousin, 2 years younger than him. Travis held a phantom executive title at Next Gen Solutions, drawing a fat 6F-figure salary while spending his days slacking off, playing online poker, and partying in VIP nightclub booths. His primary life skills consisted of racking up gambling debts and crashing expensive sports cars. And the clinic in the photographs bore an impressive, highly clinical name on its brass plaque, Prime Life Reproductive Institute. This was the exact same boutique medical facility that Beatrix Montgomery had mentioned during our marathon phone call. The place where she had anxiously accompanied Chloe for a routine prenatal checkup, because Chloe claimed she was feeling under the weather. I opened the plain text document and plugged the street address into my mapping software. The location pinned onto a rundown decade-old apartment complex located on the industrial outskirts of Chicago, right near a major freight distribution hub. The neighborhood was sketchy, the rent was dirt cheap, and it was roughly a 40-minute drive from Prime Life Reproductive Institute. I knew from family gossip that Travis leased a cheap studio apartment out there as a private crash pad whenever he wanted to lie low or entertain questionable company away from his family's prying eyes. I downloaded every piece of documentation, saved them onto a secure hardware-encrypted external flash drive, and typed a 2-word reply to the anonymous sender. Payment wired. With the transaction finalized, I walked into my kitchen and brewed a cup of loose-leaf green tea. The crisp, slightly earthy aroma filled the quiet penthouse. Holding the warm ceramic mug, I stepped out onto the private terrace. The night air was cool against my skin, and the Chicago city lights glittered below like a vast ocean of diamonds. Every variable was tracking precisely according to my projections. With that digital errand completed, I turned my full attention to finalizing the corporate liquidation of the 15% Next Gen Solutions equity stake I had stripped from Julian in the settlement. Julian's attorney, Brad Harrison, proved exceptionally efficient when handling straight corporate finance. By the following afternoon, a massive 7-figure wire transfer had successfully cleared and settled into my designated private banking account. Staring at the notification banner on my mobile banking app, my heart rate didn't elevate by a single beat. This capital was originally mine to begin with. It was the hard-earned return on 5 years of my professional youth, countless sleepless nights of labor, and the liquidated equity of my late parents' estate. It had simply returned to its rightful owner, and very soon it would be deployed for a much larger, far more definitive purpose. Over the next several days, my life operated with the disciplined precision of a Swiss chronometer. I woke up at 7:00 a.m. sharp, completed a rigorous 1-hour workout, and was at my desk by 9:00 a.m. to execute risk consulting contracts for several independent corporate clients. My afternoons were spent in high meetings with my personal legal team and private wealth managers, systematically restructuring my total liquid assets and moving the entire portfolio into an offshore family trust structure. It was imperative that my capital and my future be entirely ring-fenced from my marital past. During this week, several former friends and corporate colleagues called my personal line. Their tones were universally cautious, fishing for details about the sudden divorce. I gave every single one of them the exact same standardized corporate response. We parted amicably due to irreconcilable differences in long-term life goals. Only one caller, a female executive who had attended college with both Chloe and me, finally lost her composure after several minutes of polite hesitation. She lowered her voice to an angry whisper over the line. "Elena, are you really just going to let them walk over you like this? What Chloe did is absolutely unforgivable. She's been like this since our dorm days, acting all sweet and innocent on the outside. But underneath, she's a calculating viper who will do whatever it takes to snatch anything she covets, especially if it belongs to someone else. I never dreamed she would actually stoop to stealing her best friend's husband." I cut her off smoothly, my voice entirely devoid of emotional resonance. Julian and I separated because our marriage failed. Whatever choices he made after that are his own business. My friend let out a frustrated sigh. "You don't get it, Elena. Jules is spinning a completely different story to everyone in our network. He's claiming you were an absolute nightmare to live with. Cold, controlling, and emotionally barren, and that he had no choice but to leave for his own mental health. And Chloe, she's even worse. She's playing the ultimate martyr in her little mommy circles, crying crocodile tears and claiming you voluntarily stepped aside because you felt guilty about not giving him children, allowing their true love to flourish. She tells everyone how sorry she feels for you. It makes me want to vomit. Those two shameless sociopaths deserve each other." "Oh, really?" I arched an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of my tea. "Is that the official narrative they're running with?" "Yes. They've painted themselves as tragic romantic heroes who overcame massive obstacles to build a family. And get this, I heard from a mutual friend in Savannah that Jules is hosting a massive, lavish baby debut and naming reception at the Montgomery family estate next weekend. He's inviting every major socialite, politician, and business elite in the county to formally present Chloe and the twins. He wants to solidify his public image as the ultimate business and family patriarch." "I see." I set my teacup down on the table, a cold, humorless smile forming on my lips. "I'm sure it will be a truly magnificent celebration." After disconnecting the call, I walked over to my desk and flipped open my leather-bound calendar. Next weekend's date had already been circled twice in bright red ink. Julian's hometown was an historic old money Southern community nestled among the marshlands and weeping oaks of South Carolina, a place where traditional etiquette, family lineage, and public reputation were valued above the law. In a town like that, social gossip traveled faster than fiber optic broadband, and a public scandal could permanently destroy a family standing for generations. If a prominent family suffered even a minor embarrassment, the entire county knew about it before noon, and it remained prime country club chatter for the next 30 years. Jules, the grander you build your stage and the more high society spectators you invite to the theater, the more catastrophic the bodily trauma when you get shoved off the platform. I picked up my phone and dialed a specialized number. The line rang 6 times before it clicked open. From the receiver came a warm, distinctly southern female voice, carrying a trace of exhaustion, but undeniable genuine affection. "Hello, who's calling?" "Aunt Martha, it's me." "Elena," I said softly, allowing my tone to relax into familiar warmth. "Elena, sweetheart, my goodness." Aunt Martha's voice jumped 3 octaves, instantly flooded with pleasant surprise. "What a wonderful treat. Why are you calling your old auntie? How have you been? Are you working yourself to death up in that windy city? Have you been eating properly?" "I'm doing wonderful, Aunt Martha. How are you and Uncle Robert doing?" "Oh, we're just fine, darling." "Just fine, though. Your uncle's gout is acting up again with all this humid weather we've been having." After a few minutes of pleasant family catch-up, I shifted the conversation to my primary objective. "Aunt Martha, will you be around next weekend? I have some personal business to attend to down in Savannah, and I was planning to fly in for a couple of days." "Next weekend? Why, of course, honey. If my little Elena is coming home, I will clear my social calendar completely." Martha answered instantly, though her tone quickly shifted into maternal concern. "Is everything all right, sweetheart? Did you and Julian have a falling out?" "Just the other day at the country club, I bumped into Mrs. Henderson, and she said she saw Julian's mother, Beatrice, looking like she'd seen a ghost, sighing and wringing her hands like the world was ending. But when folks asked her what was wrong, she clammed up tight. Aunt Martha worked as a senior administrative director at the county courthouse. While it wasn't a corporate suite role, her position placed her at the absolute epicenter of local municipal gossip. She knew everyone, heard everything, possessed an unshakable moral compass, and absolutely despised high society hypocrisy. "There are just a few legal and financial matters I need to tie up in person. I'll explain everything over dinner when I get there," I said smoothly. "Oh, and Aunt Martha, thank you all so very much," he began, pausing to let the applause settle. "To all of our friends, family, and distinguished colleagues who traveled from near and far to celebrate the baptism and formal debut of my son, Alexander Vance Montgomery, and my daughter, Caroline Grace Montgomery. I am profoundly humbled by your presence today." He took a theatrical breath, his chest expanding. "Standing here today, looking out at all of you, the weight I feel on my shoulders is not the pressure of business or expectations. It is the overwhelming weight of pure gratitude and family duty. Because today I can finally stand before you and say, the Montgomery family legacy is secure." The crowd erupted again. Several older gentlemen raising their champagne flutes in a formal toast. Down in the front row, 2 of Julian's childhood friends actually wiped tears of sentimentality from their eyes. Julian waited for the noise to subside before executing the next phase of his performance. He turned his body slightly, gazing at Chloe with an expression of intense theatrical devotion, his voice dropping an octave into a soft, intimate register. "More than anything, I want to express my eternal gratitude to my incredible wife, Chloe." He paused, letting the silence build for emotional impact. "She gave me something I searched for my entire life. She gave me a true, loving home. She taught me the true meaning of warmth, partnership, and family sacrifice. Her grace, her resilience, and her unwavering love sustained me through my darkest professional hours. And now she has given me the ultimate miracle. These 2 perfect, beautiful children. Chloe, thank you from the bottom of my soul." On cue, Chloe lowered her eyes modestly, her cheeks flushing a delicate pink as she projected a masterclass image of emotional gratitude and welly devotion. A collective sigh of adoration rippled through the female guests in the front rows. Julian turned back to face his parents' VIP table, his chest puffed out. "And finally, I want to thank my mother and father. Thank you for your decades of love, your moral guidance, and your unwavering belief in me. Specifically, I want to thank my mother who has sacrificed so much of her own life and energy for the preservation of this family and who has showered Chloe and these children with boundless love and support. His speech was meticulously calculated, a rhetorical masterpiece designed to stroke every ego, check every social box, and permanently enshrine himself as the humble, grateful, successful corporate patriarch who had it all. Nearly everyone in the audience was deeply moved. Several older matriarchs nodded in vigorous approval, whispering to their neighbors about what a fine, upstanding Southern gentleman Julian had become. Julian was hitting his stride, his delivery becoming more fluid and passionate, acting as if he were already envisioning his next massive corporate IPO or a future political campaign. Right at that exact second, without a single word of warning, Beatrix Montgomery stood up from her seat at the VIP table. Her movement was so violent and abrupt that her heavy mahogany dining chair scraped backward across the brick patio with a sharp screech that cut cleanly through Julian's amplified voice. It wasn't a loud noise, but in the middle of a formal Southern toast, it sounded like a gunshot. The tables immediately surrounding the family pavilion fell silent, guests turning their heads in confusion. The professional MC on stage instantly sensed the awkward break in decorum and attempted to smooth it over with smooth event management reflexes. He stepped toward the edge of the stage, flashing a brilliant camera-ready smile. "Well, it looks like our proud grandmother just can't wait another second to come up here and share a blessing of her own with the new heirs." Before the MC could finish his polished transition, Beatrix turned her head and fixed him with a stare so icy, sharp, and terrifyingly desolate that the words literally died in his throat. The professional smile melted off his face. He instinctively clamped his mouth shut and took 2 quick steps backward, retreating into the shadows of the stage. Julian's speech ground to a complete halt. He lowered the microphone, blinking down at his mother in confusion and growing irritation. His brow knitted together, his eyes conveying a clear, annoyed warning to her not to ruin his perfect moment. "Mother?" He spoke into the microphone, his tone carrying a tense edge of forced politeness. "Are you all right? Just sit tight for one more minute. We're almost finished with the presentation." Beatrix ignored him completely. She stepped away from the table and began walking toward the stage. Her strides were slow, measured, and unnaturally rigid. Her high-end designer heels struck the wooden steps of the pavilion with a heavy, rhythmic times thud-thud-tut that felt like a gavel pounding against the chest of everyone watching. She reached the center of the stage and stopped directly in front of Julian. For several excruciating seconds, she simply stared into his eyes. Her expression was an unreadable, terrifying tempest of grief, fury, and aristocratic humiliation. A storm that rapidly crystallized into absolute glacial resolve. Then she lowered her gaze, her eyes fixed onto the infant boy, swaddled in blue silk, who was squirming and blinking up at the bright chandeliers from Julian's arms. Julian instinctively tightened his grip on the baby, leaning back slightly as a wave of defensive unease washed over him. "Mother, do you want to hold Alexander? Just wait until after the toast. We're in the middle of," without uttering a word. Beatrix reached out. Her hands were rigid and surprisingly aggressive as she seized the swaddled infant and forcibly wrenched him out of Julian's arms. Julian was caught entirely off guard. His arms were suddenly empty, his hands hovering uselessly in the air as his face flushed with embarrassment and shock. "Mother, careful. What are you doing?" Beatrix acted as if he didn't exist. Holding the infant securely in both hands, she lifted the baby up to her eye level. She didn't blink. Her gaze swept over the child's features like an optical scanner, examining the slope of the forehead, the shape of the eyebrows, the bridge of the nose, the curve of the jawline. She scrutinized every single millimeter of the child's face with agonizing, prolonged slowness. The silence stretched out to a breaking point across the entire 2-acre estate. The celebratory music had mysteriously cut out. The only sound left was the rustle of wind through the weeping oaks and the nervous shuffling of 300 high society guests holding their collective breath, watching this bizarre family drama unfold. Chloe stood frozen a few feet away, clutching the baby girl to her chest. The practiced, radiant smile had completely evaporated from her face, replaced by a creeping, paralyzed dread. Her lips parted slightly as she tried to form words, but her vocal cords refused to cooperate. Instinctively, she took a slow step backward, clutching the infant girl so tightly the child began to squirm. Julian's face had darkened from annoyance to genuine alarm. He looked at his mother, then at Chloe, and finally back at the infant boy being scrutinized in his mother's hands. A faint, terrifying ringing sound began to echo in the back of his mind. Beatrice stared at the baby for 30 full seconds. Finally, very slowly, she turned her head. Her gaze swung like a sniper's rifle, locking squarely onto Chloe's pale, bloodless face. Beatrice's lower lip began to tremble violently. It wasn't the tremor of an old woman breaking down in tears. It was the physical manifestation of a volcanic, destructive rage reaching critical mass. When she spoke, her voice wasn't loud. It was raspy, dry, and low. Yet, because of the dead silence gripping the property, and because she was standing directly adjacent to the podium microphone, every single word sliced through the air like a razor blade, broadcasting clearly across the entire estate. Miss Chloe. She addressed her daughter-in-law by her first name with chilling, formal detachment, stripping away any familial intimacy. Chloe's entire body flinched as if she had been touched with a live wire. In her arms. The infant girl was startled by the sudden tension and let out a sharp, wailing cry. That high-pitched baby scream echoed across the silent lawn like a siren, making the atmosphere instantly suffocating. Beatrice acted as if she couldn't hear the crying child at all. She kept her dead, burning eyes fixed on Chloe, taking a step closer as she articulated every syllable with absolute bone-chilling clarity. "Tell me," Beatrice said, thrusting the swaddled infant boy slightly forward in her hands, her voice suddenly spiking into a sharp, hysterical screech that echoed off the white columns of the main house. "Whose bastard seed is this child?" Boom! The collective gasp from the audience was audible. "Mother, have you lost your mind?" Julian panicked, the blood draining from his face as he lunged forward, grabbing his mother's arm in a desperate attempt to silence her, his voice cracked with sheer terror and rage. "What kind of insane nonsense are you spouting? Today is their baptism. Are you having a nervous breakdown?" Beatrice didn't even look at him. With a violent, aggressive wrench of her shoulder, she broke his grip, keeping her burning eyes trained exclusively on Chloe. The aristocratic composure she had maintained for decades was completely gone, replaced by the savage fury of a queen whose throne had been defiled by common thieves. "Me? Lose my mind?" Beatrix let out a short, terrifying cackle that sent shivers down the spines of the guests sitting in the front row. "If I had truly lost my mind, Julian Montgomery,